His father said to him, if we have to eat sand or dirt or grass, someone has to survive so we can carry on our name.
The Holocaust was a monstrous and terrible. Some have tried to convey the magnitude of its humanity, the horrors of the many, the heroism of the few. It lies outside speech as it lies outside reason, because Hitler's war against European Jews between 1933 and 1935 is outside of speech and outside of reason. It requires attention and reflection. The Holocaust reminds us that human evil, as expressed in demonic racism, particularly in anti-Semitism, is the case of the Holocaust. It's a brutal act. It forces us to realize that within the human situation, systematic evil is a horrible reality.
My father taped his story. He recorded his life as much as he could in the late 1970s. I know that he went out and purchased a tape recorder and 10 blank cassette tapes. As far as my father's growing up, he was born and raised in Lodz, Poland, and he was born in January 21st, 1923. The city at the time was the second largest city in Poland, and it was a very thriving city. There was a lot of manufacturing, a lot of industry, textiles. My father was the oldest of 7 children. He led a pretty normal Jewish life with his family. My grandfather worked all the time, and eventually, beside my father going to public school and Hebrew school, he was going to apprentice in the sheet metal factory. My father learned a lot. Our family had been in Poland for over 400 years, and most of the Goldmans and the Cedars were in the metal business. And my father followed suit, and many, many years later, after he came here, he became a jeweler. There was anti-Semitism in the city and throughout Poland. There were 30 million Polish people, and there were 1.5 million Jews. And my father experienced anti-Semitism to a degree in school and on the soccer field. There were fights, there were racial slurs, but it was the way it was, and the Jews just tried to just live their lives and kind of not rock the boat. Their freedom was totally taken away when the Germans invaded in September of '39. My father described the atrocities, the things that he saw in the ghetto, people jumping from bridges, killing themselves, people beaten, being killed in front of him. My grandfather was taken to what they called the Kripo, which was the torture house. And they beat him and they tortured him. And most people didn't even leave that building. Someone helped my father get his father out of there. And I believe my grandfather was broken at that point. I know my father was broken physically and mentally. After they left the ghetto, just to travel on a cattle car with your family. He saw his mother deteriorating and his father trying to console her. They got to Auschwitz. My father and his brother went one way and the rest of the family went the other way. They were murdered almost instantly, and my dad never saw the family again. My dad said he had the fear, you never knew if you were going to live another day. And then you had to have hope to try to move along. So I think that's just his experiences. Very dark times and just horrific. My father was 16 years old when the ghetto was walled in, and at liberation he was 21 years old. And when the family went to Auschwitz in summer of 1944, I think so many people were coming through. My dad did not receive a tattoo. He had a bracelet which he wore that had the letters and numbers of who he was. So he was no longer a name, he was a number. And as I say in my presentation, there was no dignity and no humanity. My father thought a lot about where to go when he left Germany. He never went back to Poland. He always said there was too much blood spilled, he couldn't go back, and he did not want to stay in Europe. And to go to Israel, and the thought of fighting for a new country, he was so worn out and so depleted, he couldn't do that. Going to Argentina, where some of his family went, when he talked to the people at the consulate, they wanted him to say that he was Catholic, and he said, I can't do that. And they said, well, just say it till you get to your new country. And he refused, and he said, I'm not going to do that either. So I think because of what he experienced from the people that liberated him, the 82nd Airborne Division, he saw the Americans as very good, open people that wanted to help, made his decision to come to the States. But because Pittsburgh was so similar to the city that my father was born and raised in, with the manufacturing and industry, people that he was learning from said, if you go there, you'll be able to get a job. So that's how he got to this city. My father was very scared. He knew not one word of English. And when he stepped off the train at Pittsburgh, the woman that met him at the train did not know his language. He did not know hers. And she was trying to give him directions to take the streetcar so he could go and meet his brother. And he didn't understand, and he didn't have the money. He had maybe, I think, 10 or 20 cents in his pocket. And she pointed him in the direction that he should go, and he wound up going the wrong way and realized it, went back to the train station, and he walked to Squirrel Hill to meet his brother. I think after that, he was very frustrated because he didn't know the language. And what he did in typical Melvin fashion, signed up for classes at night school so he could learn English, and tried to find a job and just kept trying to better himself. And then I think it got easier. My dad talked about his parents, and he talked about his siblings and some of the family, but he never said this was what happened in the ghetto. These were the beatings, these were the atrocities, this was what happened to my father in this torture house. I knew absolutely nothing. I knew that there was a letter that my dad had hanging on his wall from Lieutenant General Gavin. And he wrote to my dad saying, in response to the letter you wrote me, because Lieutenant General Gavin was the head of the 82nd Airborne Division, they liberated my dad. But I didn't know what they found when they found my father. I didn't even say what we taped. My dad weighed less than 85 pounds. He was a skeleton. And he had active tuberculosis, and they just whisked him off in an ambulance to start to treat him. That letter that my dad wrote, that was the only piece of correspondence I could not find. And after my book was finished, we found military archives in Carlisle, PA, and it was all General Gavin's boxes of all his documentation, and my father's letter was in that one of the boxes. Dear General Gavin, This is a letter of appreciation written 37 years too late, but I hope not late enough. I am one of the survivors of the concentration camps. I was in a ghetto and then in 3 camps, and the last camp was Woblin Ludwigslust. All these years, I have meant to write to you and thank you for liberating me from Ludwigslust. I was one of those incarcerated, the 3rd one from the door that they shipped out with the American Red Cross ambulance into the American hangars. I saw you through the window and waved. I know it's a long time to remember. I was almost 80% dead, and that's what the doctor said too. After being taken care of by American personnel, I slowly started to recover. Of course, I saw many doctors and was in many hospitals afterwards. All through the years, I was thinking about you and wanted to extend my gratitude. I came across an excerpt from the book, The Liberators, and saw your interview, and I thought I must write to you. I came here in 1951 and became a U.S. citizen. I am a small businessman, have a wife and daughter who is in college, so you can see what I did with my life thanks to you. I want to send you my heartfelt thanks, and I will always remember you. Sincerely yours, Melvin Goldman. As much that happened to him that was so bad, so horrible, he did not let it define him. Once he decided to become a jeweler, he wanted to be the best he could possibly be, and he was very well accomplished. He took correspondence courses through the Gemological Institute of America, and he learned to set stones. He learned all about gold and silver, platinum, precious and semi-precious stones. He was an expert, and he was very creative. He was also, he appraised estates. He was very, very well respected in the city. And I think that he wanted to make different creations for people because he knew that it would bring them joy. My first talk was at a library in Penn Hills, and a woman that came to my talk afterwards told us that, told me and told my family that my father had made her engagement ring and wedding bands, and she remembered the store and where it was, and that was one of the experiences. And many presentations that I've given, people will come up and hold out their hand or point to a pendant and say, Melvin made this for me and I cherish this. October 27th, 2018, I was reviewing the last chapter of my book. My son Jason texted me. He was out of town. He asked me if I had the television on, and I said I did not. And he said there was something really bad happened, and then we realized that it was the Tree of Life massacre. And that, of course, horrible, and we just felt so saddened and so worried and so concerned. And I realized how much anti-Semitism there still is in the world. And to connect it with my dad's story, I feel so strongly that we need to tell these stories, and we need to just talk about all the hate and upheaval and try to steer things in the right direction.
But as yet, in human terms, I do not think that nations or people or even peoples or neighbors have learned about the past. The hatred and not caring hurts me, since I hope that after World War II's loss of some 25 million people, the world will wake up. We send a few people to the United Nations as representatives of a community and want these few people to reconcile 4 billion people. Why you cannot talk or be nice to your neighbor next door or across the street, not even thinking of compassion. A great responsibility also lies on the shoulders of the religious leaders that preach bigotry and can't assimilate to the thought that humankind went through enough, especially some religions and others, the races, They and other empowered should make sure, not in a simplified way.
I think he would be amazed that my book was adapted into a play called Perseverance. And I think what's really important about the play, it's another avenue to talk about the Holocaust, to talk about anti-Semitism and the upheaval of today. But you see live people, and you see my father, and you see some of his family. And I think people are able to identify. You feel like you get to know the people because they're real. We were there for the first reading of the play when there was no one dressed in character, and they were just, the cast was sitting around the table, and we all broke down, and my whole family broke down and cried. I was so moved, and words can't say, I just became so emotional. It was very difficult. And then to go to the dress rehearsal, that was very difficult as well. Just thinking about, there's my father and the David Nachman, who played my father. He had his mannerisms. He had listened to my father's tapes, and he had the accent. And it was just a very emotional time. And I see that it's very important for me to tell his story so things won't be repeated again. My father always used the word perseverance. I can remember him saying perseverance, and I will persevere, since I was a little girl, and I never really knew what it meant. And as I have done my research and listened to his tapes and heard what he has said and what his parents instilled in him, he absolutely persevered. And at one point in my father's tapes, he said that his father said to him, if we have to eat sand or dirt or grass, someone has to survive so we can carry on our name.
This book is a dedication to my daughter, who's a young lady, and to all the young children of the world. I hope for them to have a better world, a future, a peaceful and harmonious life for all of these kids, and not the way my youth was cut down. The world will wake up